Most men are waiting, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right circumstances, waiting for things to settle before they start, waiting for someone to give them a sign that now is the time. The high-value man is not waiting. He is moving, not frantically, not without direction, with the quiet, steady, deliberate movement of a person who has decided what matters and is working toward it every day regardless of conditions. That difference, the gap between waiting and moving, is not a difference in talent, not a difference in opportunity, not a difference in the hand that was dealt. It is a difference in how they think, and thinking is not fixed. It is a skill, a practice, something that can be examined, understood, and deliberately rebuilt into something that produces different results. You already know that something in how you think needs to change, not because you are failing, but because the version of yourself you are capable of is different from the version that is currently showing up. You can feel the gap. Most men can feel the gap between who they are and who they know they could be, between the life they are living and the one they know they are capable of building, between the decisions they make and the ones they know they should be making. That gap is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of awareness, and awareness is the first requirement of change. This is about closing the gap, not through motivation, not through a list of habits, through understanding exactly how the high-value man thinks and why that thinking produces the life it produces. Here is the first thing you need to understand. The high-value man does not derive his identity from external things, not from his job title, not from the car he drives, not from the opinion other people hold of him, not from whether women find him attractive, not from whether his peers respect him, not from any of the things most men have been trained, consciously or not, to use as the foundation of their sense of self. This is the foundational difference, and it runs beneath everything else. The man whose identity is externally located is not free. He is hostage to the job that can be taken away, to the approval that can be withdrawn, to the relationship that can end, to the status that can be lost, to the opinion of people whose lives he does not even respect. Every one of those external foundations is a vulnerability, because every one of them is outside his control. And a man who is not in control of the thing holding him up is not actually standing. He is leaning on conditions that are not permanent. The high-value man stands, not because his life is easier, not because he has more certainty, because he has more as built his identity on something that cannot be taken away. His values, his standards, his word to himself, the quality of his attention, the way he treats people when there is nothing to gain, the version of himself he maintains when nobody is watching and there is no reward for it. That foundation is portable. It travels with him into every room. It does not depend on the room being arranged in his favor, and a man standing on that foundation cannot be moved by the things that move most men. But here is what most men miss about this. Building an internal identity is not the same as being indifferent to outcomes. This is a misunderstanding that keeps many men stuck in one of two positions. The first position is the man whose identity is entirely external, who needs the approval, the validation, the success metrics to feel okay, who is riding every win and devastated by every loss, whose sense of self fluctuates with circumstances. The second position, which some men adopt as a reaction to the first, is the man who detaches entirely, who decides nothing matters, who mistakes indifference for strength, who has confused not caring with not being affected. Neither position is the high-value man. The high-value man cares deeply. He cares about his work, his relationships, his development, his impact, his commitments. He is not detached. He is not a bet. He is not attached. He is not above the outcome. but his worth is not riding on it. He can want something badly and not need it to define him. He can pursue a goal with everything he has and not collapse if it does not come. He can be in a relationship fully and not require it to be the source of his entire sense of self. That combination, caring fully without depending existentially, is one of the rarest and most powerful psychological positions available, and it is built through the deliberate work of locating your identity somewhere that the world cannot easily reach. Here is where it gets specific, because identity is the foundation, but the high-value man's thinking is different in specific, practical ways that show up every day. The first is how he relates to time. Most men live primarily in reaction. The day arrives and the day runs them. They respond to what is in front of them. They handle what comes up. They go to bed having spent their energy on whatever demanded it most loudly. Not because they are lazy, because they have not made a decision about time. The high-value man makes a decision about his time before the day makes decisions for him. He knows what matters, not in a vague sense, in a specific, daily, non-negotiable sense. The things that are most important to him get his first energy, not the leftover energy after everything else has taken what it wanted. The first energy, before the inbox, before the requests, before the social obligations, before the distractions. This is not about getting up at 5 in the morning. It is about the decision that what matters to him gets protected time, and that decision, made and held consistently, produces a life that actually moves toward where he wants it to go, rather than a life shaped entirely by other people's agendas and circumstances outside his control. The second way high-value men think differently is in how they relate to discomfort. Most men avoid discomfort. This is human. It is not a character flaw. It is the default orientation of a nervous system designed to seek comfort and avoid pain. But the avoidance of discomfort is one of the most reliable predictors of staying exactly where you are, because everything worth having is on the other side of discomfort. The difficult conversation, the hard training, the creative work that might not be good, the risk that might not pay off, the vulnerability that might not be received well, the standard that makes people around you uncomfortable. The man who avoids all of these remains in comfort, and comfort, over time, is a kind of slow contraction. The world he operates in gets smaller. The risks he is willing to take diminish. The life he is capable of gets compressed into the zone where he can be confident nothing will go wrong, and nothing going wrong, and something good happening are not the same thing. The high-value man has a different relationship with discomfort. He does not seek it for its own sake. He is not reckless. He does not confuse discomfort with value, but he has made a specific decision. The discomfort of staying the same is greater than the discomfort of change. That decision, made honestly and held consistently, is what puts him in the gym when he does not feel like it. In the difficult conversation when avoiding it would be easier. In the work when the work is hard. In the risk when the outcome is uncertain. Not because he is exceptionally motivated, because he has made the calculation and the calculation points in one direction. Here is the third difference, and it is the one that is hardest to develop. The high-value man thinks in long-time horizons. Most men think in short-time horizons, not because they are short-sighted, because short-term thinking is automatic. The brain defaults to the immediate, the reward that is present, the discomfort that is present, the cost and benefit that can be assessed right now. Long-term thinking requires deliberately overriding the default. It requires the ability to hold a future version of your life clearly enough that it influences the decisions of the present. The high-value man asks a question most men do not ask. He asks, what does this decision look like in 5 years? Not as an abstract exercise, as a genuine filter. The extra drink tonight, What does that habit look like in 5 years? The conversation avoided. What does that pattern look like in 5 years? The skill not practiced. What does that gap look like in 5 years? The standard not held. What does that slow erosion look like in 5 years? And on the other side, the discipline maintained today, what does that compound to in 5 years? The relationship invested in, what does that depth look like in 5 years? The skill practiced consistently, what does that mastery look like in 5 years? The hard thing done now, what does that capability look like in 5 years? The long-term thinking does not eliminate the difficulty of the present, but it changes the weight of it. The hard thing in the present, seen through the lens of 5 years, often reveals itself to be a small cost for a large return, and the small pleasure in the present, seen through the same lens, often reveals itself to be a small gain for a significant long-term cost. That clarity of vision is what separates the man who is building something from the man who is surviving something. Now here is the midpoint truth that most men need to hear. The high-value man is not naturally confident. He is consistently committed. These are not the same thing. Confidence is a feeling. It comes and goes. It is high when things are going well and low when they are not. It is higher in some contexts than others. It is affected by sleep, by nutrition, by recent outcomes, by the mood in the room. Confidence cannot be the foundation because feelings are not reliable enough to build on. Commitment is different. Commitment is a decision made once that does not require remaking every day. I am going to do this. I am going to show up to this. I am going to hold this standard. I am going to become this kind of person. Regardless of whether I feel confident, regardless of whether conditions are optimal, regardless of whether the people around me are supportive, regardless of whether I am winning or losing right now, the commitment holds. And the man who shows up consistently under that commitment, even on the days when the confidence is not there, even when the motivation has gone quiet, even when the evidence for success is not available yet, is building something the feeling-dependent man cannot build. He is building a track record, a record of having shown up, of having done what he said he would do, of having been the person he committed to being even when it was difficult. And that track record is not just external accomplishment, it is the internal experience of being someone who can be trusted by himself, which is the foundation everything else is built on. Let us talk about how the high-value man relates to other people, because this is where the thinking difference is most visible. Most men are in competition, not openly, often unconsciously, but in competition, measuring themselves against other men, feeling the specific anxiety of someone else's success, experiencing another man's win as a data point about their own position, operating in relationships with a background current of comparison that colors everything. The high-value man is not in competition with other men, he is in competition with who he was yesterday. That single shift produces an entirely different experience of social interaction. He can genuinely celebrate other men's success, not performatively, not as a strategy, because another man's success does not threaten his own position. His position is not relative to other men, it is relative to his own potential, and his own potential is not affected by what anyone else achieves. This orientation produces something specific in social dynamics. Other men can feel it, the absence of the subtle competition, the absence of the need to establish a hierarchy, the absence of the low-grade insecurity that expresses itself as status-seeking or dominance displays, or the specific kind of undermining that men do when they are threatened. What other men feel around the high-value man instead is something unusual, something like permission. Permission to be where they are, to be working on what they are working on, to not be further along or more successful or more sorted. Because the high-value man does not need them to be lesser to feel sufficient himself, and the man who does not need to diminish anyone to feel whole is genuinely magnetic. Here is how the high-value man relates to women specifically. Because this is the context where most of the surface-level advice about high-value men lives, and almost all of it misses what actually matters. The surface-level version says, high-value men do not chase. They are not needy. They maintain frame. They are mysterious. These are behavioral observations. They are not wrong exactly, but they are describing symptoms rather than causes. The cause is simpler and deeper than any of those things. The high-value man does not need a particular woman's validation to feel good about himself, not because he is indifferent to connection, not because he does not want a relationship, not because he is performing unavailability as a tactic, because his sense of himself does not depend on whether this specific woman approves of him. He has a full life, genuine interests, real purpose, friends and work and development and things that matter to him, independent of romantic outcomes, and from that fullness he engages with women, not from scarcity, not from the specific anxiety of a man who needs this to work, not from the performance of being the kind of man he thinks she wants, from abundance. I am interested in you as a genuine human being. I am willing to invest time and attention in finding out if this is worth pursuing. But I do not need you to choose me to be okay. That orientation, that non-neediness that comes from having a full life rather than from performing detachment, is genuinely attractive, not as a tactic, as the natural consequence of actually having become someone worth being. Here is something about how the high-value man relates to failure, because this is where character is actually revealed. Most men relate to failure as verdict. A failed business is evidence that they are not an entrepreneur. A failed relationship is evidence that they are not lovable. A missed goal is evidence that they are not disciplined. A rejected application is evidence that they are not good enough. The failure becomes the statement about the self, and the statement about the self determines what happens next. Often nothing, or diminished effort, or avoidance of the domain where the failure occurred, because the man who is treating failure as a verdict on his worth cannot afford to fail again. So he stops trying in ways that risk failure, and stops trying in ways that risk failure is another name for staying exactly where you are. The high-value man relates to failure differently. Failure is data, specific, useful, irreplaceable data about what did not work, about the gap between his current capability and the requirement of the thing he was attempting, about what needs to improve, what needs to change, what the next attempt should do differently. Failure is the most efficient teacher available because it shows you exactly where the gap is, not in theory, in reality, with consequences real enough to produce genuine learning. The man who extracts the learning from the failure and moves forward with it is not the man who does not get hurt. He is the man who does not stay in the hurt, who allows the impact of the failure without allowing it to be the last word. Who asks, "What do I know now that I did not know before this?" and then uses the answer. Now let us talk about something most conversations about high-value men completely avoid. Emotional intelligence, not as a soft topic, as a genuine capability that separates men who lead from men who merely react. The emotionally unintelligent man is at the mercy of his own emotional states. When he is angry, the anger runs him. When he is threatened, the defensiveness runs him. When he is anxious, the avoidance runs him. When he is hurt, either the suppression or the explosion runs him. He is not driving his emotional experience. His emotional experience is driving him, and men who are driven by their emotional states rather than informed by them consistently make worse decisions in business, in relationships, in conflict, in pressure, because the decision being made is not based on what is actually in front of them. It is based on whatever emotional state has taken the wheel. The high-value man is informed by his emotions. He feels them fully. He does not suppress or bypass or perform stoicism that is actually just emotional illiteracy. He feels the anger and asks, what is this anger actually about, and what would a good response look like? He feels the hurt and allows it to be real rather than converting it immediately into aggression or withdrawal. He feels the fear and asks, is this fear pointing at a real threat, or is this the old pattern running? This is not weakness. This is the highest form of strength available, because the man who can feel everything and still choose his response is a man who cannot be destabilized, cannot be baited, cannot be provoked into a response that serves someone else's agenda, cannot be moved from his values by the pressure of an uncomfortable feeling. That man is genuinely formidable, not because he is cold, because he is clear. Here is something about the high-value man and his word, because this is one of the most concrete and least talked about separators. He does what he says he will do, not most of the time, not when it is convenient, not when conditions are favorable. He does what he says he will do. This sounds simple. It is extraordinarily rare, because most men make commitments based on how they feel at the time of the commitment. And how they feel at the time of the commitment is always better than how they feel when the commitment costs something. The commitment is made in a state of motivation and intention, and it is broken in the state of resistance, tiredness, inconvenience, or a better option appearing. The high-value man understands something about commitments. His identity is built from them. Every time he does what he said he would do, he adds to a specific account, the account of being someone whose word means something to other people. More importantly, to himself. And the man whose word means something to himself, who knows from accumulated evidence that when he says he will do something he does it, has access to something most men do not. Certainty about himself, not certainty about outcomes. Certainty about who he is. That certainty is the foundation of the calm confidence that other people experience as presence. It is not performed, it is earned, one kept commitment at a time. Here is something about the high-value man and his standards. Because standards are where most men either capitulate quietly or hold without understanding why it matters. The high-value man has standards for himself, for how he spends his time, for the work he produces, for the relationships he maintains, for the behavior he accepts from others, for the environments he puts himself in, and he holds them, not rigidly, not as performance, not to signal superiority, but genuinely because they are the expression of what he values. And here is what most men do not understand about standards. They are not a statement about what you deserve. They are a statement about what you are willing to build. When a man holds a standard, he is not saying, I am better than people who do not hold this standard. He is saying, this is the direction I am moving. This is the quality I am developing. This is the version of myself I am committed to building. And every time he holds the standard, especially when holding it is costly, he is providing the evidence that the commitment is real. The standard that is held under difficulty is the standard that is actually held. The standard that is abandoned when things get hard is not a standard. It is an aspiration. The gap between aspiration and standard is the gap between the man who talks about who he wants to be and the man who is becoming him. Let us talk about purpose, because this is the thing underneath everything else. The high-value man knows what he is building, not in a grand cosmic sense necessarily, in a practical, daily, what am I working toward sense. He has a direction, and the direction is his, not assigned by society, not inherited from expectations, not adopted because someone told him it was what a man should want. Genuinely, honestly, specifically his. The thing he is building that matters to him. The work that feels like the right work. The life that feels like the life he is supposed to be living. The contribution that feels like the thing he is here to make. That clarity of purpose changes everything about how a day feels. The man with purpose has a reason to get up that is not dependent on circumstances, has a reason to hold standards that is not dependent on whether others are holding them, has a reason to push through discomfort that is not dependent on motivation arriving. The purpose is the engine, and when the engine is genuine, when it is actually his and not someone else's idea of what he should want, it does not need constant refueling. It runs, quieter on some days than others, but running, pulling him toward the thing he is building rather than requiring him to push himself toward it. Here is where we leave this, not with a list of traits to copy, not with behaviors to perform, with the truth that makes everything in this script actually possible. The high-value man is not a standard you measure yourself against. He is a direction you move toward, not from a place of inadequacy, from a place of deciding that the life you are capable of is worth building, that the man you are capable of becoming is worth becoming, that the gap between who you are and who you know you could be is not evidence of failure, but evidence of potential. And potential moved toward consistently becomes reality, not because of talent, not because of circumstances, not because the world finally arranges itself in your favor, because of thinking, specifically because of the thinking that says, I am not waiting for conditions to be right, that says, I am not waiting for feel ready, that says, the version of me that is building something is the version I am choosing to be, starting in this moment, in how I think about this situation, in the decision I make right now. That thinking, chosen and held and practiced, is how a man becomes someone he is genuinely proud to be. Not the surface version, not the version other people can see. The version he is when no one is watching, when there is nothing to gain, when the commitment is hard and the reward is distant and the only reason to hold is because he said he would. That version is the high-value man, not a type, not a category, a decision, made again every day in the direction of who you are becoming. Start there, now, with this, with the decision that the thinking changes today.